What's going on, guys? Unfortunately, I have some bad news bears about my R32. Potentially, it could be something small. It could be something very, very catastrophic. Today, we're gonna find out. We're gonna knock a couple things off the list. But let me show you guys what's going on with it. So right now I have the car jacked up because what we're gonna do today is drop the oil pan. It's gonna be a bit of a mission, but I really want to get it done. If you are new, basically what's going on is the motor that came with this car had 6 melted pistons because the injectors were clogged. So the motor that's in the car didn't come with the car. It's this motor right here, and there's the head from the motor and the main caps and everything. All 6 pistons were melted on the top area of the ringlands, so this motor was just trash. You can watch the teardown video up here. Everything else looked good on it. The bearings and everything, the crank, everything looked solid on it, no marks or anything. So I'm actually in the process of buying parts to rebuild this motor, so those videos will come soon. So right now this motor's making this weird ticking noise. And I can't figure out what it is. I took off all the belts, so we didn't have the power steering pump, the AC, the alternator, the water pump, or the fan connected to the motor. So the only thing that was spinning was the crank and everything in the motor. And we still had the noise. So one thing you can do is you can put like a flathead or an extension on parts of the motor and put your ear up to it, and you can hear what noises things are making. I did it everywhere. I did it on the oil pan, the front, middle, rear. I did it on the head everywhere. The only place that I heard it was on the fuel rail and at each injector. And the noise matches the injectors perfectly, and if I rev it, it speeds up. It doesn't get any louder. It sounds a lot louder in video than in person. But I've been talking to some people, I'm getting great suggestions, and we're concluding that it could be a spun bearing. So today I'm going to be dropping the oil pan and checking everything out, and hopefully we're good. This motor has less than 5,000 miles. I changed the oil at 1,000 miles and at 4,000 miles, so it just got a fresh oil change. I have a magnetic drain plug and I didn't see any metal when I changed the oil, so that leads me to think maybe it's not a spun bearing, but I just need to confirm before we move forward. The other thing that I'm getting suggested is that it could be one of the hydraulic lifters are either broken or they need to be bled, or I've never done anything with the head of these motors, so I'm not 100% sure what all the like terms and everything are called, but the little like bucket things, it's that little bucket thing underneath the cam that the camshaft lobe hits. I've been told to check those out, take the cams out, and make sure that those are all good, make sure one's not cracked or anything. That's the next thing that we're going to check if we don't have a spun bearing. I really hope that we don't have a spun bearing because I really need to drive this car to get to work. But without further ado, let's start getting everything ready. I've got the car in the air already, so now I got to get the engine hoist out, hook the chain up to the motor, and then I can start unbolting everything. So I have to drain the oil, which sucks because I already jacked the car up, so we're not going to get all of it. But once we drop the pan, we'll have all the oil out. I got new oil and a new oil filter just because, you know, we're going to put new oil anyways. Let's put a new filter, even though it's been like 600 miles since I changed the oil, if that. Oil filters are cheap though, so it's whatever. Yeah, I'm not seeing any metal really. Maybe some super small shavings, but there are like little like clumps of oil. I lowered the car a little bit just to get as much oil out as we can. Alright, we got the engine hoist hooked up to it. This is just to hold the motor in place because we're going to unbolt the subframe and the motor mounts and everything. Basically what we're doing is taking this oil pan off. So I'm hoping I don't have to take the sway bar out, but we've got to definitely unbolt the subframe. So we're going to unbolt the steering rack so the steering rack can stay where it is. We're going to unbolt the control arms, and then we've got 2 bolts up here to the chassis as well as the motor mounts, and then the subframe should come down. I also just remembered that I have these steering rack bushings from Energy Suspension that I got from my 240, but because my 240 actually already had them, I ended up not using them. So since we had to drop the subframe, these are going to go in too. there's a bunch of like brackets bolted to the subframe that are for like power steering lines. I don't remember my 240 having that, so I'm having a little bit difficulty trying to get those off. So subframe is out. There's just like little brackets like these that are bolted to some power steering lines. There's some lines that run across here, some right here. All the other ones are 10s, and this one's a 12 millimeter. But I've been leaking power steering fluid. I've known it for a little while, so that's why this side is all wet and messy, and this side's relatively normal, just dirty. So I threw the energy suspension steering rack bushings on. These were my old ones, and this one's like not too bad. It's still like relatively stiff. It's pretty soft. This one is totally blown. Like, come on. This is not good. This wasn't doing nothing. So we're one step closer. Now what I have to do is take off those two brackets there. They bolt to the trans and the side of the motor. And then once I do that, we can start taking the oil pan off. So here's the oil pan. I don't see any metal shavings anywhere. A lot of oil, but no like metal shavings, which is good. Oh, I just got a leaf in there a little bit. I'm gonna clean this out, clean up all this gasket maker. I gotta do the same thing on the block, but let's take a look at the motor. Okay, so here's the motor. One thing I'm noticing, look at the pickup. It's got some stuff on it. I'll unbolt that and we'll pull it off and take a look at it more. Visually, everything looks normal apart from the pickup. So I'm gonna ask some people some questions real quick before I continue. My plan was to unbolt the rods one at a time, check them out, make sure the bearings are good, and then call it good. But because there are no metal shavings in the oil pan, let me see if that's even necessary. You can see there's stuff on there, but honestly, I don't see any metal. There's mainly gasket maker. So I sent some videos and pictures to people waiting to hear back. Okay guys, so it's a new day. I am currently draining all the coolant because we're gonna take this radiator out. I need to check the timing. Right now I have both the intake and exhaust cams lined up with the timing marks, but our crank pulley is not lined up. So I need to take the crank pulley off and check the gear behind it and see where that's at. Because if that's not lined up, then our timing's off, and that's probably what's causing the noise. So crank pulley off. So now we can double check, make sure the timing is correct. We have all the marks lined up, but down there, look at how this key is different than where the key is on the gear. I think that's an issue. So I'm gonna loosen the tensioner bolt, take the belt off, and take this gear off, and check out the rest of the crank. Brand new tensioner and spring. Brand new belt as well. So let's get this off. Okay, try to keep the top ones on as much as I can. Now we can slide this gear off and see what's going on. Okay, so this is turning to more than a 2-day process. So here's a clip of what happened. It's kind of hard to film with the car in the air, and I can't find my tripod, so sorry for the lack of B-roll shots. Down here on the crank, we have the timing gear, which the timing belt goes on and it connects to the cams, and that's what keeps the timing the way it's supposed to be. Well, this was not lined up how it's supposed to be. It had play in it, which is a no-no. And you could see right there that it got chewed up. This right here is the keyway that goes into a slot in the crank, and that keeps the gear from moving. The crank pulley has one as well. This is one of the keyways that keeps the crank pulley and the timing gear where they're supposed to be. This is the keyway for the timing gear, and we got chunks missing. That is not good. This is destroyed. Can't use it. Thankfully, it ate up the gear and not the crank. I sent pictures of everything that happened to the guy that's going to be doing the machine work for my next motor, and he's telling me that I got super lucky that this got eaten up and not the crank, so I'm able to just use some sandpaper, just get the crank nice and smooth. There's no like scarring or anything, any chunks missing. So thankfully, I'm gonna be able to just get a different gear, and a different keyway. I'm going to end up taking it from this motor. I have the crank for it just chilling right here. That's waiting to get polished, and it's going to get a little bit of machine work too. That's what's going to be going in that motor. But anyways, I'm going to steal the keyways from that motor. So we're going to have two perfectly good keyways. I still have this one which looks like it's in pretty good shape, so I'm going to save it. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any way to salvage this, so this is probably just going to get thrown away. But right here I have another one and it's perfectly fine. However, that's not the end. My oil pump was missing one bolt. I don't know how I didn't notice it or if it came out, but it's missing one bolt and there's oil all over everything down there. I check my oil pretty regularly, every couple days or so. Because the last motor we ran it with no oil because we had so much blow by. So now I'm making it a habit to check that as often as I can. I never noticed the oil get lower than what it's supposed to be at. This motor only has less than 5,000 miles on it. It's like 4,300 or something. So it's a shame that this is happening with the crank. But thankfully, like I said, the crank is still good, so we are not worried about that. I'm going to be taking the oil pump off, resealing it, and then putting it back on with the correct amount of bolts, and then that should be good to go. But that means that the oil pan has to come off, and I had already taken it off and put it back on and used gasket maker. So now I have to take it off so I can get the stupid oil pump out. The reason I have to do that is because on the oil pumps, which there's this guy which sits in the oil pan, and that's hitting on the oil pan, so I can't just unbolt everything on the front and the bottom ones and then pull it straight out because it hits the oil pan right here. So oil pan has to come off. And then once that's done, once we put everything back together, I have to do a leak down test because I have to make sure that with the timing being off, they were both off by one tooth. I have to make sure that the valves and pistons didn't touch and bend my valves. So we'll have to do a leak down test once everything is back together. So that'll be the last thing that we do. And if it passes the leak down test, then the motor should be solid. We had no bearing material in the oil, nothing in the oil pan. Everything looks solid. I'm really glad that I didn't pour the new oil in yet. I was going to this morning, but I was like, let's wait till we put everything back together. So thankfully I did that, or I would have to go buy more oil. Alright guys, well I got the oil pan off, the oil pump off. So now we can reseal the oil pan and the oil pump, throw everything back together, and we should be solid. It just sucks because I literally did this 2 days ago, and now I have to take it all off and redo it. So that's awesome. Oil pump is back on, so now I still have to clean up the gasket on the oil pan. I have this little guy that I usually use. It cleans up the gasket pretty well. However, it's just really worn because I've had it for a couple years. I ordered another one, but it's not coming till tomorrow. I would really like to get this done out of the way tonight if I could, but I am struggling trying to take this off, so we'll see what happens. There are other things that we have to do though. So these can just pop in there. Oh shit, I'm gonna drop it. Making progress. We got the gear on. We have to get that mark lined up with that notch, and it's pretty close. It might even be on it. I'll have to put my phone right in front of it to look at it head on. But once we do that, we can throw the timing belt on. Timing is set. We torqued the idler and tensioner pulleys. You torqued them to 40 foot-pounds. So now the timing's done. I went through a full cycle and we don't have anything hitting, so that's good. Got the motor mounts, everything in. So now we can finally take this hoist off. So right now I have the spark plugs out. We're going to do a leak down test. We got the crank pulley on. So right now we have cylinder 1 at top dead center. So I'm going to put the tester on it and we're just going to see what she does. So right now we have cylinder 1. We've got 100 psi in and we're about 98 psi in the cylinder. You're always going to lose some because of the piston rings, but losing just 2 psi is amazing. So this motor's super healthy in cylinder 1. So now we're just going to do the rest, and I'll let you guys know how it goes. Okay, so leak down test was successful. I'll put the numbers on the screen right now. Everything looks pretty good, so I'm going to continue reassembling everything, but we won't really know until we start it up and drive it, see how it does. Hopefully that stupid sound goes away, because if we do all this and it doesn't go away, I have no idea what the noise is. Alright guys, I'm calling it a night once again. This has been a almost week-long adventure, but we have the motor pretty much ready to go. Still need little things like the radiator, the coolant, it still needs the oil. But yeah, we're doing pretty well, and I relocated the battery. If you guys haven't seen that video, definitely go check that out. But this is what I'm calling it a night, and for sure tomorrow we're gonna fire this thing up. I'm still paranoid, even though the leak down test numbers were showing that the motor is healthy and the valves are sealing. I don't know, I'm still a little paranoid. I won't be 100% confident in this motor until we start it up and I don't hear that noise. So I'm about to start the car. What I'm going to do first is unplug the cast and crank it just so it lets the oil pump prime the motor, even though the motor still had oil in it, but I just want to do that, and then we'll do the official start. Alright guys, as you just saw, the car is running. We have the ticking noise totally gone. I'm still like on the edge, like I'm still paranoid. I think that something's gonna happen. It's been 5 days since we did the first startup. I've been driving the car around a lot. I've probably put about 100 miles on it. Still, everything is good on it, except occasionally I'm getting this weird idle where it's idling super high normally, which is not normal, but it's idling at like 1700, which is really high. Sometimes it's going from 2000 to 1000, up to 2000, I'm down to 1. It's like, it just keeps doing that. It's not consistent. Like, it doesn't happen every time I drive the car. For some reason, if I drive the car in the morning, it's more likely that that will happen. And if I drive the car in the afternoon, it's more likely that I'm just gonna have a high idle. So I still need to figure that out, but the car is running. I think we're gonna put that into a separate video because looking on forums and stuff, I'm not finding much answers to RB idle issues. So I want to make that its own separate video because if I do eventually fix it, I would like that to just be its own thing. So if people are having that problem, they can just go search for it and that video will pop up. But that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Check out all my other content and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.